Hey everyone, we're going to take a look at the Marvel Legends Spider-Man Retro Series Shocker action figure. A quick look at the packaging. There's the Retro Spider-Man artwork logo at the top, artwork on the left of the Shocker letting go some of his shockwaves. And over here we see the figure package on the plastic bubble. He comes with two interchangeable relaxed hands, as well as two orange shockwave effect parts. Moving on to the back of the packaging. There's the consistent retro Spider-Man logo at the top, as well as the same artwork of the Shocker over here. There are some instructions for you to swap out his hands. Over here is the description of the character, and then the rest of the characters in the wave, and finally some product information at the bottom. So let's go ahead and get this figure open. To unbox the figure, I simply slice the plastic tray off that retro card back, so that makes it easy for me to store the retro card backs. The Shocker comes with two shockwave effects. These are cast in a translucent orange. They're exactly the same sculpt, and we've seen them before on other figures like Wonder Man, Adam Warlock, as well as Polaris and Havoc. His fists are pretty big, but you should be able to fit these blast effects made of a flexible plastic onto his hands easily. He also comes with two relaxed hands. The hands are cast in brown plastic, and they've got good texturing on them to show the leather texture of his gloves. The brown hands are then overlaid with his VibroShock gauntlets. These are cast in a silver looking plastic and then given an extra layer of silver paint on top, so the finish looks really smooth, shiny, and awesome. These hands have no articulation to them, but that's fine by me because these gauntlets are huge and do get in the way of him moving his wrists anyway. There's a cut just above those gauntlets, and you just pull those hands off and replace them with the relaxed hands. And those relaxed hands are a good option to show him in a more neutral pose. The Shocker is made up of an entirely brand new sculpt, and this pleases me so much because Hasbro probably wouldn't be able to accomplish an accurate classic look Shocker with all the previous action figures and molds that they had. The one thing that bugs me is that he's made up of mostly yellow plastic, and the shade of yellow over here on this figure just makes it look a little bit like cheese. He is impressively sculpted with a crisscross pattern all over his body, and while that's supposed to make him look more interesting because he doesn't have a wash or any lining applied to those crisscross patterns, and the yellow plastic doesn't really catch the light really well, the yellowness just really comes across quite plain, and he ends up looking like a block of cheese. Zooming into his head sculpt, the paint is applied cleanly, white for his eyes as well as the black for the outline. There's good sculpting to show his stern expression with furrowed brows, as well as more detail for his cheekbones as well as his nose. On the top of his head, there is a separate piece of brown plastic that is attached, and this is kind of like the mohawk design element at the top of his head. Moving on to his torso, it's also a cast in the yellow plastic and brown paint for the rest of his outfit. We see the same metallic looking plastic with a silver paint finish on it for his belt, and that's got a V logo in the middle. Moving on to his arms, there's a stripe that's painted in brown all the way down his arms. We also see that same leather texture on his gloves, and his gloves are overlaid with those VibroShock blasters, similarly cast in a metallic looking plastic with that silver paint finish. Moving on to the back of the figure, similarly clean paint applications of brown paint for the rest of his outfit. Down to the sides of his legs, there's also that brown stripe all the way down, consistent with his arms. And I'm also impressed with the design of the joints in his elbows as well as his knees. Both joints have that new pinless design, and it's also kind of subtle, but the yellow on the elbow as well as the knee doesn't really match the rest of the yellow used on the figure. It appears a little lighter. And moving on to his boots, there's also a silver cuff that's consistent with his belt as well as his gauntlets. And on his boots, there's also nice sculpting to show texturing and detail with all the wrinkles in the leather. Moving on to articulation, his head is on a ball hinge, so you can spin his head 360. There's actually no sideways tilt. He can look down that much as well as up. Ball hinge at the shoulders, so you can spin his arm all the way around. Coming out that far, beyond 90 degrees, so that's great. Upper bicep swivel for 360 spin. Pinless double jointed elbows, so that's very good range. And because you can swap his hands out, he also has a swivel joint here. He's got a mid-torso ab crunch, so he can go forward that much, as well as backward quite a lot. There's a swivel at his waist that's pretty well disguised by the belt accessory, so he goes 360. Ball joints at the hips, getting you quite a good spread. No problems forward and backward as well. Swivel at the thigh, so that gives you 360 spin. Double jointed pinless knees, so that's quite good range. He's got a calf swivel that's well disguised by that cuff on the boot, so his calf spins 360. And there's also upward ankle tilt as well as downward. And finally ankle pivot outwards as well as inwards. And now I'm gonna draw in the lines for that crisscross pattern all over his outfit in order to make him look closer to the way he appeared in the comics or the animated series. To do that, I'm gonna use a Gundam panel marker, GM02 over here for gray. I do believe using the colors in black or brown would also work for this Shocker action figure, so it's really up to you to pick the type of color that you want from the Gundam panel marker line. I'm not great at painting figures, but the fine tip of the marker should help you to keep that paint within the lines of the sculpting. The fine tip definitely helps with controlling the way that you apply that paint as well as keeping those lines neat. If you do end up having some slop like I have over here, it's easy enough to remove with a soft rubber eraser, just simply rubbing off the slop. And you will see the groove from the sculpting actually helping you keep that paint neat and within those lines. And here he is halfway done, just to give you a good idea of what he looks like before and after. I definitely prefer him with the lines drawn in. It's simple enough to do and I would recommend you to do it as well. Just make sure that after you draw the lines in, let the paint kind of sit for a couple of hours so that the plastic can absorb it. And here he is in his fully lined glory. It looks so much better to me and definitely a much better representation of the Shocker from the comics or the animation series. Even if you don't paint or draw those lines in, I think the sculpting on this figure is fantastic work. The figure feels solid in hand and doesn't suffer any trade-offs from the lack of articulation in his wrists. I can say that this is the definitive action figure of the Shocker character. I wasn't sold on the previous Marvel Legends Shocker action figure, but here's a quick side-by-side with the Toy Biz version that I've kept in my collection for all these years. This new release is a far superior representation in the iconic head sculpt, design of his outfit, as well as the articulation scheme. The only thing that you really need to do is to draw in those lines and make this figure close to perfect. For size, the Shocker stands at 6 1/4 inches, and that's just under 16 centimeters. For size comparisons, here he is with a couple of Spider-Man action figures, with Green Goblin and Beetle, with the Kingpin, Silvermane and Tombstone, with Hammerhead and Punisher, and She-Hulk and Iron Man. Here he is with some G.I. Joe Classified series, and some Star Wars Black series. This figure is close to the perfect representation of a classic Shocker. The sculpting work is fantastic, and the paintwork on the gauntlets, belt and boot cuffs makes this figure really pop. It's a pity that Hasbro didn't paint those lines in, but it's easy enough for you to fix with a Gundam panel marker. In short, look no further, this is the definitive iconic version of Shocker. It is awesome and don't pass this up if you see it in stores. Please like and share this video, let me know what you think in the comments below, and subscribe to my channel for more toy reviews. Thanks for watching, take care and stay safe.